Hello, everyone. I'm Jean-Claude Mystic, and welcome to this evening's special report. The title is Force Majeure Endgame, the gold, silver, and crypto show. With me tonight, of course, are the three legendary warriors on the screen here. You can find the first one, of course, Mr. BIX Weir at roadtoruta.com, and you can find Andy Scheckman here, of course, at milesfranklin.com. Andy and BIX, how are you guys? Welcome back to the show.
We're great.
Good to be here.
Doing real well.
Yeah, good to be here with two of my favorites.
Look at my picture. Holy moly.
I can't take the credit for this. This was Cliff High. I had sent him the original poster. It was just the three of us in a black T-shirt. He says, no, dude, you guys are killing it. You have to hear the lament of the women, of the men you've captured. So yes, we're slaying the banksters all day long, and we're getting closer and closer, as the title suggests, to this force majeure here and the end game. Guys, if you haven't seen BIX Weir's last video or second last video on his YouTube channel, he did share a lot of information there, including one of the remote viewings from Dick Algore Crypto Viewing. So I'll bring that link up on the chat here in just a moment. If you haven't seen that video from BIX, go check it out. It'll bring you a little bit more detail into the context of this special show we're bringing in tonight. Before we get into all of that and the impetus for this show this evening, including the tariffs on the gold bars coming out of Switzerland, I want to ask both of you guys who haven't been on the show for a while here. It seems like things are getting weirder by the day. The administration is flip-flopping all around, presumably in a certain tactic in this art of war that Mr. Trump, President Trump, is waging against his enemies here. But it's keeping everybody on their toes, a little bit destabilized, and to some extent also demoralized. We want to see some action here, and yet we're seeing this one step forward, two step backs, and it's very frustrating for everybody watching the show. Bix, what do you think are the major components here, perhaps in the last month, that have happened that are showing you that we are perhaps getting even closer to that end game? What's going on your radar, Bix?
Well, from what I like to use what Ted Butler had figured out about how the riggers set the price of silver. And he explained it week after week that they use the moving averages to sucker in the commercial trade. The commercial traders use the moving averages to suck in all the managed money and the tech traders. And they played that game since the early 70s. They short into the rises and they slam it down, get all the people who were long to dump, and then cover on the low. And they did it time after time after time for 50 years. Mm-hmm. Now that's not happening anymore. We're looking at, at least for the last 5 weeks of this commercial traders report, they haven't been shorting into the rise. Something else has been going on, which is completely unheard of in silver, especially because it was so easy for them for so long. And I think what is happening is that now that practically everybody who has studied silver knows that's how they do it, they're waiting for that price to drop below the moving averages to pick up as much physical silver as possible. We've seen it through India, the India imports. We've seen China do it, and now we're seeing Russia do it. All three of them are just sitting there below the moving averages, waiting for the next banker slam, because that's how they play the game. And they haven't been playing the same game. It'll be really interesting on where the price goes next, because the commercials are not set up for a slam, not at all. And the last, I don't know if you have it, the last Commitment of Traders report, it shows the managed money dumping 66 million ounces net. So about 59 million ounces of their longs they dumped, and then went short about 7 million ounces. So completely out of context of what they've done in the past. So everything has changed. And, you hear people say, well, it's different this time. It's different this time. Then the same thing happens over again. I don't see how it can happen over again this time. People they know the game. And there's so many big players who know the game that really don't like the U.S. rigging the markets. So, yeah, I think it's amazingly exciting. And Trump one day will say, yeah, we're going to buy gold. Imagine that. Not just say, gold's not a big deal, or, like all the other presidents have said. Wait till the U.S. says, we're going to buy gold, and we're going to add it to our reserves. And, oh, by the way, we don't have the 8,000 tons. We have more like 80,000 tons. And we're going to buy another 80,000 tons. Stuff like that's in our future at some point.
That sounds like conspiracy talk there, Bix.
I could prove it a million different ways. And it's
exactly. I'm giving you a compliment because, of course, all of these conspiracy theorists are proven right time and time again here. Sometimes it just takes a little bit of time. Andy, speaking of time here, the last time you were on the show, probably a month or so ago. Since then, of course, we had the military parade in D.C. We had Trump erecting flags, suggesting perhaps the territory was captured. Just this last week now, he's announcing that he wants to federalize DC. Of course, they're using the excuse of the gangs like hitting on people, which, of course, yes, there is crime in the city, but it's like a circumvented or roundabout way to perhaps changing fundamentally here how the power structure and dynamic of Washington works underneath the Constitution. For most people, who are the normies watching CNN, this is completely over their head. But for us, we're starting to paint the picture, and all these dots are starting to connect that something is very, very different. Now, in the last couple of months, of course, Trump has been successful in negotiating these trade deals. He's up to 700 or 800 billion now in revenues as the 1st of August, exactly as he projected. And now even CNN has to say that, oh yeah, look, it looks like Trump was right. We're making more money out of this. And so he seems to be fundamentally changing the way the United States is acting on a world stage as it pertains to our financial structures. And then to add to the list, he just passed the Genius Act, also suggesting again the big changes are also coming in terms of crypto mass adoption. So in all of that, is there anything specifically also that you've seen in the last month that suggests that things are not the same as BIX is saying here, and that perhaps we're getting close to a certain end game here in terms of price rigging and manipulations? Andy?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much happening on the retail side and behind the scenes. I truly do believe that we are entering a new monetary system. You could argue, I could argue, with the passage of the Genius Act, that's exactly what we've seen. I think demand is literally drying up for U.S. Treasuries. And so what the Genius Act is to me is synthetic demand to run the front end of the Treasury market. In other words, you're creating stable coins which are backed by short-term U.S. Treasuries, which will be used to run the daily workings of the U.S. economy. It's the back end of the market where there's supposition. And I've talked at length about my interviews with Judy Shelton. If he really wants to bring back manufacturing, which would be a very noble cause, it would be a very difficult thing to do in an environment where we are the world reserve currency. Being the world reserve currency, you guys, means that you will always have a trade imbalance, a trade deficit. This is Triffin's dilemma, where we cannot provide the world enough dollars just through trade alone in order to provide the liquidity they need for all sorts of business dealings all around the globe. So in essence, we export dollars. They sell their currency to buy our currency, which means our currency is strong, theirs is weak, which means you end up hollowing out manufacturing because you can send your manufacturing across the globe to places where they can make things for far less money. And you end up having, as a result, the benefit of that for all of these years has been low interest rates, cheap goods, and high asset prices. Because another part of the deal that we are seeing go awry is putting excess reserves into U.S. Treasuries. They're not doing that anymore. So the bottom line is simply this. I think they understand this. In fact, Vice President Vance has talked about this. He has said out loud on White House letterhead, Triffin's dilemma means being the world reserve currency might not be such a good thing for us anymore. So my theory, and I'm sure BIX will have some thoughts on this, is that they intend to peg the back end of the bond market with gold, and they will revalue gold at some point. In other words, the process of revaluing gold isn't really revaluing gold. It's massively devaluing the dollar, depending upon how high they go. So the dollar goes down in terms of valuation, which is good for exports. You have zero interest rates on the back end of the market on a 50-year to start with, as Judy says, 30, 20, and 10-year treasuries redeemable in gold with a zero interest rate, zero coupon bond. In other words, you have zero interest rates in a weak dollar to reshore your manufacturing and make it competitive. You use the stablecoin issuance to run the front end of the bond market. I think this is the direction that it is going. And when I started talking about gold revaluation 6, 8, 9 months ago on podcasts, people kind of thought I was crazy, and now everyone's talking about it. So I think we are witnessing, with all the reshoring of metal, I want to talk about that, but I do think we are entering a new monetary system. I think you could argue with the passage of the Genius Act, that is the first salvo of it.
Right.
I think that to me is what's sticking out. One other thing I'd like to mention, when I take a look at the market right now, something very interesting I see. You have all-time high margin debt for the public. You have all-time high, what's it called? Option debt, option interest. So you have record share of options for the public. You have the all-time highest allocation of the public into the stock market, greater than the great financial crisis, at 54%. So you got the public all in on stocks, on margin, and on options, okay? At the same time, you have the insiders, the institutions. They've been selling between 2 and 4 billion a week since June. Bezos has sold 6 billion in his Amazon stock since June 1st. You got the big insiders and board members at NVIDIA doing the same thing. You got Buffett with 500 billion in cash. You got all these people selling on the inside as the public is fully in the equity market. At the same time, you have the biggest money in the world standing for delivery on Comex and draining the world's exchanges, and the public no exposure to precious metals. I guess what could possibly go wrong? I see that as a very clear signal as well, contrarian indicator.
There's one last policing to be had. Let me share this with the audience as well. We just talked about 2 important videos I want to share with you. The first one, of course, is on Road to Ruda here on YouTube. The video title was Silver and Gold Alert, Comex Riggers Endgame. This is the video you want to watch. And also perhaps this one here, The Private Road, Predictions of Year End with 2025 with Jenny Moonstone. You want to watch these 2 videos. Now, in terms of Andy's videos, go to his YouTube channel here, Miles Franklin Media. Join in also on the brand new broadcast there with Michelle McCory. Great stuff coming out of Miles Franklin. You want to check that out. But the video Andy was talking about is this one here with Judy Shelton, where you were talking about this gold back, maybe treasury note sometime in July 2026. But it seems that the stepping stones to that are being played out now in short order. Now, Bix, I want to go back to you here, one, to comment on what Angie just said, but I want to bring a piece of information that's very important. Over the last number of decades here, you've made it a point to look at the Road to Ruda theory, the comic book that was coming out of the Fed. And for many people watching your shows, they always said, Bix is talking about a comic book. It's not serious. It's tinfoil hat stuff. It's just a comic book, JC. Why do you bring Bix Weir on? Okay. Well, listen to what just happened this week. Fed notes here. Go to the federalreserve.gov. They're talking about an idea of how to fix the system here. They are now talking about an official reserve revaluation, right? So gold is being reviewed, brought back into the system, and now the Fed is even floating this stuff out. And now we're talking about changing Jerome Powell maybe also. So Trump is definitely making the moves here that suggest that gold is coming back here in a big way, and we're seeing the pressure in the price as well. So Andy, Bix, going from the Road to Ruda to this article here from the Federal Reserve, what say you in terms of how close we are to this becoming fact, as opposed to just a comic book theory that people were kind of mocking for the last number of decades, Bix?
Well, I didn't write the comic book. The Fed wrote it. And this guy, Stephen DeVoe, who's involved in the implementing the computer trading programs that, we see rigging every market today. The reality of, what Andy's saying is really interesting, because I think I have a different take on whether or not the 50-year gold-backed bond type of structure would work. I mean, we can't forget that, well, I think a lot of people have forgotten that we're the ones who defaulted on gold back in 1971. Mm-hmm. So thinking about the way our government works, how we get crazy government after crazy government every 4 years, I don't see anybody who would trust that the United States would make good on a promise like that 50 years out. We've done it before where we backed out of it. We were in 71. We were the world's reserve currency, and then we backed out of it, implemented the computer trading programs to keep the prices steady. And then here we are. Can we go back to that? Who would trust us?
It's one of those things that fool me once, fool me twice. And this is why everybody's moving away from the dollar, de-dollarization, and all these other platforms. Keep going.
And it doesn't solve the problem.
Right.
And nobody talks about the problem, which is 3 quadrillion in derivatives is the problem. That weapon of mass financial destruction hasn't gone away, and unless it's dealt with during those 50 years, there will be problems. That is something that has to be maintained through massive market manipulation, changing the rules. You know, they just gave the big banks, Bank of America, $500 billion more room to put derivatives on their balance sheet. I mean, it is insane what is going on right now behind the scenes to keep things going. So to think that we can do that, and then with the crypto, I mean, I've been in crypto since the very early days as well, you know, and one of my biggest problems was if the cryptos ever got intertwined within the current monetary system, the global unbacked fiat system, if they got intertwined and literally almost inseparable, then cryptos will go right along with the meltdown in the derivatives. And the banks have done everything they could to add derivatives to the cryptos. I remember Chris Giancarlo, the head of the CFTC, saying,
"Tamp down."
Yeah, we had to tamp down. Well, he wasn't the tamp down; that was a different guy. But he said, you know, we had to stop the rise of Bitcoin in 2017. Otherwise, it would have just kept going up. So we introduced derivatives to Bitcoin so that it would get Bitcoin under control, which it did, and he bragged about it to people. So I think the stable coin part of this system, I can't think of a worse thing for cryptos. I mean,
can we take a sidebar on that, Bix? I'm with you because just before the passing of the Genius Act, Marjorie Taylor Greene was out there saying, "I'm not voting for this thing. There's no ban on central bank digital currency," and that was a promise made by this administration. So they haggled for a couple of days, made changes, and finally they passed it. But when you look at the stable coins, some would argue, well, it kind of looks like a CBDC in disguise. Andy, you're shaking your head. Why is that, and why should the audience be aware of this right now and be weary also of some of these new changes that are coming up that might not be completely fleshed out or not necessarily in their best interest, Andy?
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. I was watching a video by a gentleman the guy that designed BRICS Pay. BRICS Pay is a retail cross-border payment system that is now being integrated into the Belt Road Initiative. And it's a big deal. It's a big deal for lack of dollar settlement across the globe. Anyways, he was being interviewed and said, yeah, it's not just for BRICS countries. We're going to open it up. And right now we're in negotiations with the Belt Road, which is 155 countries. He says, we'd love to be able to integrate with Visa and MasterCard in the West, but we're being sanctioned. So the West is off the table. In essence, it's for everyone in the world with the exception of the European Union, the UK, and the US. Similar to the BRICS bridge, which is the exact same thing. It's only central bank to central bank. It is also being integrated into the Belt Road and other countries, as Sergei Lavrov said it would be done recently. Big deal for the BRICS. But anyways, that's an aside. But he said, he was asked, sorry, my dog won't leave me alone. So he was asked, you know, they said, Sergei, you know, there's terrorist organizations out there. How do you know that BRICS Pay won't be used to fund terrorist organizations? And the guy said, you know, we're very sensitive to compliance as we're opening this up to so many countries. So our technology is equipped with KYC, AML, and KYT. Now, I left my company in Minnesota because it's the only state that regulates the precious metals industry. It's federally non-regulated. We take all the classes. I've taken tons of them. I know what AML is, anti-money laundering. I know what KYC is, know your client. That everyone knows that who's in this industry. But KYT I had never heard of, and it's called Know Your Transaction. He went back and repeated it. I had to rewind and say, what did he just say? So you have technology that will know who you are, where the money came from, and where it's going. That's with BRICS Pay. But my feeling is that, yes, this could be a central bank digital currency in a stable coin clothing. In other words, they will know the on-ramp and the off-ramp. They'll know where the money is going, where it came from. And so it is very much like that. It is very, very much like that. But in essence, to me, what it really speaks to is diminishing demand because of what BIX said. No one trusts us anymore. How do you get demand for an asset that, like U.S. Treasuries, where demand is falling. At the same time, what it also does is greatly, I think, reduce the reach of the Federal Reserve, and kind of will have a lot to do with expanding the powers of the U.S. Treasury. And I don't know if that is Trump trying to kind of neuter the Federal Reserve, but this indeed would have a lot to do with it. Could also really hurt the banking system, because as these stable coins are issued, what you will see, and as more of them are purchased from the Fed to go into the Treasury General account, everything goes through the Fed. The Fed's going to have less and less and less and less in the way of reserves. Once their reserves get to 3 trillion or less, like we saw in 2019, you begin to see cracks. You begin to see real strains in liquidity. And it almost seems like he's trying to stick it to the Wall Street banks, those who think they control monetary policy, stick it to the Federal Reserve and take power back and give it to the U.S. Treasury. At the same time, find a synthetic demand for the Treasury. There's a lot of angles you can take on this, but to BIX's point, cryptocurrency was supposed to be decentralized and the furthest thing away from the federal government. It does seem as though they have, certainly, whether it be through Comex contracts on Bitcoin, legislation into stable coins, ETFs, it's been very financialized. And if the market goes down or the bond market goes down, what does it do to the crypto market, to the stablecoin market? And something that's stable, backed by an ever-increasing mountain of debt, doesn't seem too stable to me. There's a lot that you could pull at here, but I don't think it's what a lot of people who are cheering for it really is. I think it's different from what they think it is.
Right. So the challenges are big on the domestic front to make this transition happening. We're already in the process of it now. We have to look under the hood. We have to ask the tough questions. We're doing that. But at the same time, we have players around the world who might not want to play the same game, or might not be on the same footing. You just mentioned Lavrov. I remember last year during the last BRICS summit, Russia was suggesting too that they could somehow take over the price mechanism of silver. That, it's kind of an act of war when you're talking about financial systems around the world. And I was curious here, in the last couple of days, we had Trump suddenly, just after the passing of this Genius Act, although some people were arguing that it could be having relations to what's happening in Ukraine, Trump was sending some nuclear subs here on the coast of Russia, seemingly, again, in this weird transition time we are in now. Bix and Andy, what did you make of this? Was this a shot across the bow, kind of saying, hey, you guys, don't make any too much noise on the financial system. We're leading the way in this transition. Otherwise, there's going to be hell to pay. Was this more a tactic to negotiate what's happening in Ukraine? It just felt like the timing was weird and all of this, and off all of a sudden, and it kind of went away and nobody's talking about this. Of course, he was referring to Medvedev's provocative statements, as Trump was saying, but what was behind this story? Let me ask you, Bix, first. Did you follow this, and what did you make of it?
Well, I've long held that Trump and Xi and Putin had a pact when he first got in, that Trump would be the bad guy first, his first term. Putin would be the bad guy second, which is, when the last 4 years, and then Xi would be the bad guy third, and ultimately destroy the banking cabal and all that, the deep staters. And the third would be the invasion of Taiwan, and basically saying screw you to the rest of the world as far as chip manufacturing. And then it's kind of like you control the high-end chips, you're way ahead of everybody, and they know it. Everybody knows it. But people think that these things are happening, and we're gonna, nukes are gonna go off tomorrow and things like that. I don't think so. I don't think, I'm not saying it can't happen. Of course, anything can happen. But I think it's more of an orchestrated play than something that's almost out of control.
Okay. And just to be clear for the audience members too, we looked at this with Janine. She pulled cards. She doesn't see nuclear attacks in any scenario here. This is not what this was about. But it was creating leverage somehow, and stuff that are still secrets to be revealed is basically what we were getting at, and we couldn't get that much detail. Now, on the positive side, Trump just signed this executive order banning banks now from debanking Americans. And we've had all these crazy issues in the United States, Canada including, during the Freedom Convoy, people getting their bank's account frozen. So that's it sounds like a step in the right direction. Absolutely it is for a lot of conservatives. But at the same time, this stable coin, or what some people refer to as the network of networks, could eventually achieve the same objectives at a higher level than even the banks here that are being precluded from playing this political game. Do you see that also as an issue here as we're moving into this uncharted territories with CBDCs in some other countries, with our stable coins here, to where this network of networks could eventually debank people here in the same way as the old system did? BIX first.
Well, they can do it now. I've been debanked twice because I'm dealing in cryptos and cash and silver. I've been kicked out of Bank of the West and JP Morgan Chase. They can track any transaction. I don't, people talk about the CBDC being the be all end all control. I think they already have that kind of control over us. Mm-hmm. And they can track us anywhere we go at any time through our cell phones. It will be more, it's easy for the whole population to understand that, they're under control if there is a CBDC, but they can track any transaction you do other than a cash transaction. And in some ways they can even track that through ATMs and follow you around and things like that. But the reality is the banking cabal has control of everything we do. A CBDC, they can cut off our phones today if they want. We did it to Russia. I mean, It's not very hard to do. And with computers in the background, it's kind of what they have already. So I don't think it's a gigantic thing. I wouldn't want it, but I would rather have the system fall apart and then start fresh again. Start fresh with new rules that say you can't do the things that they've implemented already. They can't track and have ways to enforce that through the blockchain and things like that. And I think that's where I ultimately think that's where we're going. And we can think of every nightmare derivative thing to happen before that goes down. Cliff said they're going to have three different types of currency. They're going to try before it just goes to, hey, you got what you got, and you got some Bitcoin, you got some gold and silver. Go ahead and make your way. Don't worry about your government. That's where I think ultimately this is going to end up. Every scenario I run, there's no way that we can move forward with the 3 quadrillion in derivatives. It's as of, I think it was 25 trillion was added in the first quarter of this year. Mm-hmm. I mean, this isn't going down. It's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And all it would take is a couple trillion to blow, and then everything blows. All the banks are interconnected. Now all the cryptos are interconnected. I've been screaming from the top of my lungs for 10 years. You have to have your assets in your own possession only, because that's what's going to let you start again after the old system goes down.
Right. Let me bring a couple of other things in here too.
Real quick, let me just comment on the debanking thing, because I was thinking about this. You just saw all of these banks do something called update their living will, whatever the hell that means. Basically, they're trying to figure out a way under periods of great strain how to protect the banks without bringing down the system. You Google it, you'll read all about it. And then I'm thinking, what he's doing, the issuance of stable coins is like USDT, like USDC. They shrink the traditional banking system's balance sheet because each dollar must be backed by a treasury bond, and it's not created through bank lending. So when stablecoin issuers buy treasuries, they're in essence pulling reserves from the Fed, not commercial banks. And this reduces the overall Fed reserves. This is what I was talking about, where the banks could seize up. And this stablecoin growth, this is where the banks get pissed off, because you're pulling reserves. This is where scarcity creates funding issues. The banks get jumpy. This is the exact kind of thing that you would see them update their living wills all about. They're not happy with this. Mm-hmm. it's like BIX was saying, he's pushing back against the banking cartel, trying to take the power away from the handful of these bullion banks that are all part of the Federal Reserve and give the power back to the Treasury. I think that has something to do with it, because why would Bank of America and JP Morgan reject his business?
I think with Tether, though, they kept a lot of those quote reserves at the banks in bank deposits. And I mean, obviously that's another problem when you think about, the FDIC doesn't have enough money to bail out the regular customers, much less all the CBDCs. That's another thing. Is the FDIC going to insure CBDCs and stable coins? It's like, I mean, I just think it all has to do with trying to make the explosion even bigger.
Okay.
Right.
I brought up a poster here of Trump perhaps taking over the Federal Reserve. He just named the commissioner of the Federal Reserve now, seemingly putting more power oversight from the Treasury into the Federal Reserve. It seems that we're going down that route. Before I do that, though, I wanted to share this with you and get your guys' take on this. I read this the other day from the New York Post. Venmo and PayPal users can now send money to the U.S. government to help pay down the $37 trillion in national debt through Venmo and PayPal. So there's a bridge now from Venmo and PayPal to go directly into paying the debt. And when I see the bridge going that way, I also see it going that way into a bailing system. Are they setting up a structure here to perhaps bail in some of these extra service providers that are not necessarily the traditional banking system? Is that what you guys see when you see this? What is this all about? And one American right now, with the distrust that you guys have just described, wants to actually help pay the federal $37 trillion national debt. What is this story all about? You, Bix, first.
I have no idea who would help pay the debt down, but I do know that Venmo and PayPal linking, sidestepping the banking system. I don't believe Venmo and PayPal can fractionally reserve their balances. So I'm a much bigger fan of that than like a JP Morgan or Citibank,
right,
saying I'm going to help the government. But I mean, the government, like I said, they can do a lot of this stuff on their own if they wanted. It isn't efficient through a government agency, and from everything I've read about the Fed and how archives are kept at Social Security, which is basically the most important IOU that the government has. I think that's the only one they won't default on is Social Security, because pretty much every American is tapped into that, and although it might not seem like a lot of money right now for most people to live off, in a deflationary collapse, like a derivative meltdown, that money would be newly issued. So it could be gold coins, redeemable, which I think ultimately we'll get to. And I do think the United States was planning on something just like that with the little notch in the coin. They were going to put identifier, read the structure of the coin. Honeywell invented this technology. And I mean, it's not like there's not a plan of what to do when the banks collapse. They know it can happen. They have a name for it. It's too big to fail. They know what's going to happen and it fails. And I think we do have a way to start fresh. We are the largest debtor nation in the world, so we'll be better off than anybody else. So, as far as linking to Venmo and all that, yeah, it's all going to be part of the new system. But everything will be different when the derivative bubble that helps control the system today is gone, and it has to go away. There should be no doubt in anybody's mind that we can't move forward in a positive way if we keep having these massive derivative fix-up jobs by the Fed, by cryptos, by everything. I mean, if you think about crypto really in another sense, it's just more inflating of money, the money supply. We got all these different currencies out there and all these derivatives of derivatives. And you can look at some of a lot of the cryptos are derivatives. Yeah. And, how many are in violation of Reggie's patent? 98% of them. I mean, there's so many things to think about. At the end of the day, you just stand back and go, holy shit, I just got to get my shit in my own possession and wait for everything else to happen.
I'm with you, because on one hand, it's not just in crypto. Every other markets, we have these derivatives over derivatives, the over-the-counter derivatives, all these stuff on one hand. And on the other hand, we have the lack of transparency. We still don't have the audit of Fort Knox. We have no idea what gold we have. As you say here, there's conspiracy theories that we might have more, and that things are a lot different than we know. We'll get into that in just a moment. But I wanted to, because I'll get into gold and silver at the end here. I want to look at some data and some of the charts you provided for the audience. But I didn't make a mistake. I confabulated two stories here. So I wanted to go back to that here. So here, Trump was visiting the Federal Reserve. He's referring Powell here to a criminal investigation for the trillions of dollars that were spent on renovations. There seems to be something happening here that Trump wants a little bit more oversight on the Fed. He's been balking at Powell for the last couple of months that the interest rates are not where they're supposed to be, and that he's acting criminally against the American public and all that. So we're seeing that on that front. The other part that I confabulated, which I made a mistake on, was Trump removing the IRS chief and then appointing Bessent from the Treasury here in the acting role at the IRS. On that note, too, we just crossed the 700 billion or 800 billion in revenues. And if you recall, 6-7 months ago, Trump was talking about, if we were to remove income tax on that lower tier 250K income per year, we would need to make about 750 billion in external revenues from these tariffs. We're there now. And now this change at the head here, as the IRS chief is being replaced now by the Treasury guy, seems to suggest that we might be seeing here the closure of the IRS for something new here with the External Revenue Service. So on both of those fronts, are you seeing that as, JC, that's just business as usual, it's the typical political games they play? Or is there fundamentally some changes here happening both at the Fed and also at the IRS? Andy first.
It really appears that way. I mean, who knows with the way that he's thinking? There is no question some very, very big changes with the Federal Reserve, and that is for sure 1,000%. As far as the IRS is concerned, sure. I mean, if you want to get support from half the country or more than half the country at that lower tax level, which I would argue is probably very much in the other camp. They would typically, these are the folks that are receiving some form of government subsidy who would vote for it. This might just be a good way to rebalance the tables. At the same time, you see him talking about redoing the Census Bureau information, which has been stacked against the Republican Party by allowing illegal immigrants to be counted in the Census Bureau, which gives them more seats.
Doge having access to social services also, all that database as well. Yeah.
Right. So, yeah, I mean, I could see it. And why not? I mean, why not? I don't know about that. I will say that there's no question in my mind that we are moving to some sweeping changes at the Federal Reserve, certainly. And they have been very political. Powell has been very political. He lowered rates when the economy was far better than it is now. The numbers were far better than they are now, leading up to the election, which would have benefited Biden. And at the same time, when the rest of the world has been lowering rates, even though it's only going to exacerbate the problem, but the political pressure he was pushing back against. Look, I personally think that by lowering rates, all you're going to do is accelerate the issue. It won't make homes more affordable for first-time buyers. It might make it a little easier to get a loan. But that's what pushed the asset prices up too high to begin with, by lowering rates. So he's in a sticky wicket. But there is no question that Powell is on his way out, and they are going to bring someone in who has, look at Stephen Mirren, the guy that they want to act as the acting replacement for the person who stepped down. This is a guy that did the Mar-a-Lago Accord, who is talking about all sorts of things to work down our debt, to make our manufacturing more competitive, and to reshore it. How do you reshore manufacturing? It's all about mathematics. All right, you got to go. You drive me nuts. It's all about mathematics, and that is simply this. Just by 2028, we owe 28 trillion in treasuries that are coming due. I mean, and we take in 5 trillion a year in tax revenue. That's 15 trillion on 28 owed. We have a $3 trillion a year minimum deficit. That's another 9 trillion. That puts 28 to 37 on 15 trillion in tax revenue. How do you pay it off? So to me, the dollar is dead. I think they're going to soft default on the dollar. They're going to inflate the crap out of it so that they can support the borrowing market. Now, to Bix's point, trust is a big deal. I agree with him. But they only need to do it long enough to devalue the dollar massively by revaluing gold. When Roosevelt devalued the dollar by 40%, gold went from 20 to 35. If that's what they did, and everyone's talking about it, if they devalued the dollar to revalue gold, every $4,000 increase in the price of gold gives a Treasury general account 1 trillion free and clear. 1 trillion free and clear. So, if you were to put gold at $10,000 an ounce, that's over 2.5 trillion free and clear fiscal windfall to the Treasury Department. And that all they need to do is tell the Fed, make it so. The Fed revalues gold. The Treasury issues new gold certificates to the Fed. The Fed prints money out of thin air, which devalues the dollar, gives it to the Treasury, which can work down its debt or do whatever they want in terms of not issuing 10-year treasuries for a couple of years because they have enough of the windfall. But the point of it is the devaluing of the dollar and then pegging gold to redeemability in longer duration treasuries would allow it to have zero interest rates in the devalued dollar to reshore manufacturing, to make it a palatable deal, because now you have zero rates to bring it back and a devalued dollar making your stuff more competitive, and the stable coins running the front end of the treasury market to keep the engine going. So over time, maybe, just maybe, you have the ability to grow your way out of this problem. 60% of this country, you guys, doesn't have a college education. And AI is going to kneecap a lot of white-collar jobs. Right. Where does it come from? Where do people go back to being productive in this environment? One way or the other, we have to reshore manufacturing. And if there is any nobility, and at least what I think he might be trying to do, it is the realization of that. We can pretend and keep our head in the sand and pretend that we can just go on like this, where all of these critical things, from pharmaceuticals to aircraft components to military components to all of these things, microchips, are being made around the world, and we're not competitive.
Well, the only way to become speaking of the reshoring strategy, you just talked about the revaluation of gold or the devaluation of the dollar as a mechanism to that, but there's also these tariffs now. Trump is suggesting that he might put 100% tariffs on chips being made outside of the U.S. Again, asking.
Well, what does that say, though? Yeah. But what does that say? That says exactly what Vice President Vance said. Being the world reserve currency isn't in the best interest of the United States anymore, because you will always hollow out your manufacturing. So when you put tariffs on your friends, Japan, Canada, Mexico, Australia, the EU, in essence, you're saying, you know what? Maybe you should find other currencies to transact in. This is what the whole thing about the BRICS is all about. In other words, is he trying to signal to the world that we don't want to be the world reserve currency anymore? We're going to devalue the shit out of the currency in order to save the bond market, in order to reshore manufacturing so that we can start this cycle over. In other words, Richard Russell used to say the Fed can inflate, hyperinflate, they can default. This is a soft default, a Hail Mary, if you will, by pegging gold to the back end of the treasury market to have zero interest rate on the long bonds and a devalued dollar at a much higher price. And who would benefit from a gold revaluation? Not just the United States, every central bank on the planet who's been buying gold. It may not be the best idea in the world, but what are other ideas and options do we have? Simply, how do you pay $28 trillion in debt in 3 years with $15 trillion in revenue? This is kind of what I'm getting at. And when you see guys like Besant say, we're going to remonetize the asset side of the balance sheet. Well, what assets does the U.S. government have? The largest asset is student debt of over 45%. Then it's military. So you could remonetize national parks, I guess. But how about reshore all the gold? So much gold has come into this country since November. It's like nothing we have ever seen since World War II ended, when everyone sent us their gold as part of the Bretton Woods deal. So she jumps up on the damn desk, and this is who's driving me nuts. I'm very sorry. He literally jumps on my couch and jumps 4 feet across onto the desk. Anyways, so I can't think of a way where they can reshore manufacturing, become competitive, pay off the debt without interest rates going high enough to blow up the entire system. I guess we'll see, but things are changing, to your point, you guys, for sure.
All right. Let me get Bix to chime in on that. And before, look at that. Shocking. A record explosion in student debt delinquencies. Talking about this, the debt market. Bix, what say you here? The scenario that Andy is playing out, the scenario that we're hearing here from Federal Reserve to some extent, and some of the key voices out here in the field. Do you see another solution to all of this? Apart from maybe letting everything implode and starting over, where's the soft landing? Is it still possible?
The soft landing would mean we'd have the same corrupt system that we had before we fell.
The same deciders.
Yeah, it doesn't fix the problem. The problem is corruption. The problem is 14 computers printing as much money as possible and not telling anybody, any other country. We don't know. Elon didn't tell us how much fiat money was created in those 14 computers. It could be, $100 trillion and given to the Biden family and all their friends. Most likely it was. The reality of, Catherine Austin Fitts has tracked this down. 100 trillion in bonds, fake bonds, and all the shit. I mean, everybody should know the United States prints money and doesn't tell people about it. So does China and Japan. If you're trying to fix the system from within the framework of what everybody thinks is happening, you're not going to do it. Mm-hmm. The reality is the United States Mint can print or can manufacture a $36 trillion coin in silver and hand it in and say, here's your payment for the U.S. debt. Yes, it would collapse the trust and faith and confidence. I don't think anybody thinks there's any trust and faith and confidence in what we've been doing. Mm-hmm. I mean, the reality of fixing something for a soft landing puts us in the exact same place we started with a quadrillion in derivatives that have to be there to hold up the fraud that is the U.S., the global unbacked fiat monetary system. It is a fraud. It does have to come down. I think Trump absolutely knows it has to come down and is doing everything he can such that the old system doesn't come down, and the crypto assholes behind the scenes, the pedo crypto guys don't end up with all the money. This perfect way to do it. Oh yeah, we're gonna integrate crypto and then pull that plug on the 3 quadrillion in derivatives, and poof, it's gone. I mean, it just seems so obvious that the only way to move forward positively is to destroy the unbacked fiat monetary system itself. And everybody, who doesn't like the Fed, you don't like it for a reason. It's fraud. It's creating money out of thin air. The entities that got saved during the banking crash, everybody should know that we should not be living in this type of system. And things are so bad today everywhere with everybody out of jobs. It's all because of this system. Mm-hmm. And unless we get rid of this system, we're going to have the same type of thing. It's not like we're going to settle things down and get us moving forward like they do every president after him. Oh, I can do it this way. And it all gets a little better. And the whole thing's bad. And they don't tell you how bad it is, obviously. I mean, JP Morgan Chase, the entire board of directors was in on that Epstein stuff. And they're in business with these people. Mm-hmm. And Epstein had one banker that entire time. And that's JP Morgan Chase. And the guy whose office is right next to Jamie Dimon was the lead guy in this thing. And Jamie says, I'd never heard of Epstein. I mean,
what about KYC and know your transactions? Where the hell was that?
Know your transactions. Crypto people know exactly what know your transactions are. Because every time they try to get send money to a broker, a crypto broker, the bank says, who is this going to? Yeah. They know your transaction. The banks are told to say that. Yeah. Well, this is a fraud company. Don't do that. We are so deep in the shit. There is no way out except to wipe it clean. And it's really easy to do. Greenspan deregulated derivatives back in the 90s for this very purpose, to wipe out everything.
Let it implode.
But doesn't Trump and the Republican Party take the fall for that then? And how do you do that? How do you reset the system, but have enough understanding by the people so that they don't throw everyone out and go back to the same people that created the problem?
That is the problem. And I talked about that in like my first interview I ever did. It's like, what happens after the crash? Are we smart enough now? I do think there is a plan in place, because I do think we have a hell of a lot more gold than 8,000 tons. I mean, it should seem obvious to everybody that 8,000 tons isn't a lot of gold in the grand scheme of things. China was buying 2,000 tons a year. Jim Sinclair kept saying they're buying 2,000 tons a year for like 50 years. I mean, and we're saying, oh, we have the most gold at 8,000 tons. It's ridiculous. I mean, the whole
they've been
thing,
manufacturing or mining about 500 metric tons a year for 25 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. On top of buying it. Yeah.
And all the gold that they don't tell us about. I mean, you read Gold Warriors by Sterling and Peggy Seagrave about Yamashita's gold. And they have all the evidence. They literally have, I have 3 CD-ROM discs of evidence. It is just so obvious that there's so much more gold than they're telling us. And that has to come into play. If we want to go to a gold standard at some point, we need to know how much gold there is. Probably the most important thing for the amount of money circulating in a system, you have to know how much there is. And if there's a huge gold find, that gets added to it and things like that. Right now, we have no idea. We look at guys like Jeffrey Christian to tell us, oh yeah, there's 210,000 tons that's ever been mined in history. It's 2 Olympic swimming pools. It's bullshit. It's a huge lie. And there's just so many lies. I'm telling you, there's no fixing the system other than let that derivative bomb blow and see where the pieces land and then move forward with something else. I do think the U.S. has enough gold to move forward with a gold standard. I don't know if they have enough silver, but I think we're going to try with silver as well. But the gold, I think the U.S. has been lying to the public for so long, and I've proven it so many times. I don't know how much more. I'm thinking 1 million tons that the U.S. has, and everybody says I'm crazy, but we'll find out, I guess, when the thing falls apart and we sit there and go, what can we use for money now? And we really do have a lot more gold than we say. And I think that if our government already knew that, people within the government, like the Road to Ruta comics that came out of the Fed, that's exactly what it was saying. Yeah. How do we reallocate the money to the people after the crash? And they do it by Social Security balances. That's why Social Security is so important. Those who have bought into the system the longest get the most. They won't get a ton. No one will be like so rich that they, have all the gold. But it just, to me, it makes sense that that's the only way forward, because everything else is a little tiny Band-Aid on a massive, massive $3 quadrillion derivative problem.
Interesting times indeed. Guys, we have a couple of minutes, and I promised the audience before we get in that we'd look at some fundamentals here for gold and silver. Bix, you kind of mentioned this at the beginning of the show. Let me bring up some of those charts now so people understand really what's happening in the background. You were talking about these commercials, what they're playing right now, and how the game seems different. And I want to share that information for the audience members to maybe take some decisions here if they're not already hedged in this crazy world of ours, that maybe this is an option for them. So let's look at what you have from the Comex here. Andy, Bix, you made this video. I have the link in the description box below. People can go watch that too, and some of the remote viewing stuff that came out of that too. But explain to us what you meant here, why the game is different right now in silver. Let's talk about the fundamentals here behind silver.
Yeah, well, the basics, the fundamentals of the Comex are not really fundamentals of silver. It's the fundamentals of manipulation.
Right.
So the fundamentals of manipulation, you can look at the Comex position, the commercials versus the managed money, and say, okay, we know for the last 50 years, as the price rises above the moving averages, the big banks, the commercials, short into the rise, and then they cause a collapse and then cover as it goes below the moving averages, and the managed money or the tech funds go do the exact opposite. That's what's been going on for 50 years. For the
wash, rinse, repeat. It's always the same thing.
Yeah, it's always the same. For the last month and a half, silver's been staying strong in the high 30s. They aren't shorting into this rise. And it's very surprising. And if you look at last week's report, which came out, the week goes from Wednesday to Tuesday. That's the reporting week on the Comex. So ending last Tuesday, August 5th, a really interesting thing happened. The managed money side of it, they actually got rid of 59 million of their longs and added 7 million shorts. So they're basically bailing out. They're scared. They don't know what to do. And normally the commercials would take that. They take it and say, "Oh, good, I'm covering my shorts that I was, I needed to do in rising into," and they didn't do it either. They didn't do anything. The commercials for the last 5 weeks have done nothing. They're not shorting into the rise, so they aren't set up for a slam like they were in 2011 when J.P. Morgan put their guy as Obama's chief of staff, and they allowed the price to go from 25 to 50 and shorted all the way up past $30. Shorted, and then they slammed it down, got it back down. I think did it get under $10? It's like $11 or something. After that, it was crazy. But that's how much control they literally trade on average. It's about 500 million ounces on the Comex every single day of electronic blips. It's a fraud, and it needs to be shut down as soon as possible. By the way, there's only 2 CFTC commissioners on the board right now. They should be 5, and both of them have given notice.
Nobody wants to be part of the sinking ship. It's about to blow up, baby. Okay, so and also, guys, if you look at the cup and handle formation, we're breaking through that now. It appears that we're on our way for a new bull market in both gold and silver. Andy, let me bring you up the chart that you shared with us today, so if you can share this with the audience as well. What's going on here? Why is this important? Also, as a note here, all of these withdrawals.
Because what you see, the received would be the amount of silver received into Comex. Withdrawn is the interesting one. These are loadouts. And so first and foremost, I've been doing this for 36 years, and forever I used to say that 1% or less of contracts on Comex would settle or stand for delivery. Most of them would be cash settled or rolled over, almost all of them. And what we are seeing here, not only are massive deliveries standing for delivery, but the withdrawal is ridiculous. And just to give you an idea of how big this is, the first 3 days of the Comex contract for August, the first 3 days, there was 20,126 contracts that were posted. 100% of those contracts stood for delivery. Not the 1% that I remember my whole career, literally, but 100% of those contracts stood for delivery. Now, that's 2,126,000 ounces. That's $7 billion worth of gold that stood for delivery in 3 days. And almost all of it has been offloaded off of the exchange. There's massive physical demand right now through Comex. And when you see every contract issued, settling, that's real demand. A one-to-one demand, which I've never seen in my entire career. And you're seeing the same thing. The first 3 days of the August contract for silver, again, I just have the first 3 days info here from last week. They took off 5.32 million ounces. So it's respectable, but not the same what gold was doing. The point of it is that there is massive delivery demand for gold and for silver and for platinum. Just in the first days of platinum, we saw 50,300 ounces stand for delivery. Not as much, but there's not as much platinum available either. And bottom line is simply this, that whoever is doing this, you're talking the most sophisticated traders in the United States since November have brought in way north of 100 billion in gold and silver that we know of. My guess is they're bringing it in from all other places. Maybe it's the Treasury through the Exchange Stabilization Fund, for whatever reason, to prepare for what's coming, not telling Congress because it's in the guise of national security.
Right.
But whoever's bringing it in,
they're definitely not telling the public at large either. So,
well, and that's the point.
Yeah.
And all of those withdrawals. Now, ask yourself, where the hell does all of that silver go? Who's going to take possession of all that silver? That's a lot of silver right there. And where's it going to go? How do you get it out of the Comex ecosystem?
Yeah.
So all I can say is this is as unusual as anything I've ever seen in my career, and is an indication that the people that have been playing the game cash settling no longer want to do that. And to BIX's point, maybe it's the same commercial banks, who knows, acting as proxy for the Treasury, or maybe they're just trying to cover their positions and not shorting a rising price like they've used to do, because they realize not only with the Basel III implications that we're seeing, but all of the deliveries that we are seeing, the offtakes, makes shorting this into a rising market really dangerous when you're seeing this kind of demand for physical delivery. Really dangerous, which would be an existential threat to some of the biggest banks in the world.
I want to get into the existential threat here and the title of the show, the force majeure. It appears that there's another trial balloon that was just put out a couple of days ago, and this was the U.S. hinting here that they were going to hit the 1 kilo bars and the 100-ounce gold bars coming in from Switzerland with a tariff. I believe the tariff was set to 39%. Now, that could create the force majeure that BIX was talking about, but just a day or two later, there was a correction issued by the government, suggesting that maybe the Treasury spoke out of step and that those gold bars would not be included in this new 39% tariff. That being said, this could have been just a trial balloon or a shot across the bow where Trump is saying, hey, I might want to bring refining back to the United States here. We're going to be using gold in a big way, and we want to have bigger control over the system. Let me ask you, Bix, in your theory here, how does this perhaps tie into this force majeure here that could break down the Comex and bring us into a brand new world here, Bix?
Well, I think at some point, the Comex futures and options trading for gold and silver with a delivery mechanism. It's kind of a soft delivery mechanism. They've learned over the years that they could get screwed because it's the actual exchange ultimately that is responsible for settling the trade. Mm-hmm. If someone defaults on one side, I got way over my skis. I'm sorry, I can't pay this silver, which I think is going on right now. Somebody did, and it has to do with this year. We've had the most silver delivered out of any year so far. Now, last month we thought, it's going to about half of what was going on at the beginning of the year, and then it turned out during the month, after the first few days where most of the silver is delivered, it rose from 35 million ounces to 50 million ounces, which in the past 10 years is huge. And there was 70 and 80. Next month, the September is the next delivery month. Now, the question is, what can the Comex do if someone can't deliver? And I think this is all linked to the JP Morgan 1.2 billion ounces that they leased to Bank of America and then subleased out. And I think whoever ultimately ended up with owing the metal back to whoever lent it to them is having a hard time finding physical silver. It was great when they got it. They sold it. It's like, having cheap money because you're paying a very small lease rate for silver. It was like less than 1%. What bank wouldn't do that unless they can't figure out how to get the silver back at the end of the lease? I think that's what the main thing is. And so are they going to get enough silver back? I don't know. But I do know that every time that the price gets pushed below those moving averages, India, China, and Russia, and probably every hedge fund on the planet now that they know what's going on, is going to be buying physical silver and taking delivery.
They're backing up the truck. Yeah.
And when Andy said, it's a big deal to take it out of the Comex, it is. It's a huge deal, especially with silver, because it's not easy to put it back in. Because they have to track every bar. So if you're pulling a 1,000-ounce bar out of the Comex, they don't know if you're returning a tungsten-filled bar, and it has to go all through this whole rigmarole. So whoever's pulling them out of the Comex, which is the easiest and cheapest place to store it, has clearly an understanding that you don't want a third party holding your metal. Right. And with the big banks in gold, that's absolutely true. They don't want the Comex holding their gold. I mean, gold, you look at the amount of dollars in gold versus the amount of dollars in silver, the gold money could buy every ounce of silver in one day. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's crazy. You think Buffett could buy every single ounce of silver on the planet at, $40. Mm-hmm. That's available, even according to Jeffrey Christian, who says there's 6 billion ounces, which there aren't. But even if 6 billion ounces would be $240 billion, Buffett could buy that. And people say, well, no, Bix, the price goes up if you start bidding on it. Not on the Comex. Mm-hmm. It doesn't go up. Look at the history of the Comex. Wars break out and the price of gold and silver go down. It's rigged. Mm-hmm. And how many contracts did Buffett buy? And now is he and Elon just standing for delivery every month? Could be. I think that's a more than 50% chance that it would be
plausible scenario. Yeah.
He did it in 1999 in the late 90s. and he bought 130 million ounces before they said, stop this or we're going to take you down. And then they stole it from him with the General Re problem. And then Elon's not an idiot. He knows all his businesses use massive amounts of silver. Electric cars, the Tesla tiles, the space stuff. Where's he going to get the silver to run all his businesses? And he's not dumb. He knows exactly what's going on in the silver industry.
Speaking of the silver, Andy, are they done wiping out all the doré bars? You and I were talking about this the last couple of months, that industry was going directly to the mines now, circumventing maybe the Comex and some of these pricing mechanisms to make sure that they had enough silver for their manufacturing. Are they at the bottom of the well here at these prices, or the mines kind of upping up production right now? Where do you see the doré situation right now in both gold and silver?
60% of central banks polled said that they're buying increasingly from artisanal mines and local regional mines directly from. Vince Lancy talks about China going now to Mexico and buying silver before it's even called silver. Again, they're buying doré, they're buying concentrate, but this is from the second largest producer in the world. And one of the things that's really interesting about the tariff deal was that even though they've backtracked on it and said that was the border protection or the customs and border speaking out of turn, it's for other types of metals, not gold or silver. To me, it goes to show how sensitive gold's global plumbing can be and how quickly things can happen to distort prices and trade flows. Because something happened Friday night that I've never seen before. Bix, you can chime in on this one too. I've never seen this. So Friday night, I'm out to dinner with some friends, and one of the guys happens to work with me. He says, "Shit, do you see what futures are at? They're at $3,500." I'm like, "Bullshit, they are. I'm looking at spot right now. It's at 3,400." He says, "Dude, I'm telling you, futures are at 35. This is Thursday night, I think.
Yeah,
futures are at 3,500." And I'm like, "Well, this can't be. I have never seen $100 spread between spot and futures like that." And so it goes to show that if something happens that impacts what could be a steady flow of metal, just like that, the price shoots up by $100 on the futures market. Now it has come back since they've taken this off the table, but I guess it really goes to show just how difficult it is. And to Bix's point about once it leaves, it is very difficult. In fact, we have a Brink storage program with 9 vaults around North America. One of the vaults is a Comex vault. It's Brink's JFK. And I have a client who has a bunch of 1,000-ounce bars there and originally wanted to store them in Brink Salt Lake City, another one of our facilities. And I told this to, at the time, it was a very, very large player that I bought it from who deals directly with the Royal Canadian Mint and gets 1,000-ounce bars. And he said, "You don't want to do that. You don't want to send it to Salt Lake." I'm like, "Well, why?" He's like, "Because I have them stored in JFK Brinks. They're brand new Royal Canadian Mint bars. They're stored there. And if you take them out of the Comex ecosystem, you'll never get them back in easily or quickly, and they have to be reassayed." I said, but wait a minute. You're moving it by Brink's truck from Brink's JFK to Brink's Salt Lake City. No one touches it. It never leaves your ecosystem. It doesn't matter. Once it leaves the Brink's ecosystem, it needs to be reassayed. So when you see this stuff being pulled out, you're talking many semi-trailers worth.
Right.
It ain't ever coming back. Never coming back. And when you see the second largest producer of silver in the world going all around the world buying doré and concentrate from miners in South America and Mexico, and paying to ship it back to refine it, that should speak volumes. And another thing that was said that I found interesting, you just mentioned about buying it and the price goes up. What China, I believe, is also doing is aiding in suppressing the Western price and then going all around the world and gobbling it up from places like Peru and Mexico and everywhere they can gobble it, where you can buy as much as you want, and guess what? The price doesn't go up. It only goes up where it is controlled at this point in the West on Comex. So this is a whole big game, but you can see just like that, they shoot up $100. What happens if it's for real? How fast does the price of gold and silver go parabolic? And I think when the realization of all of these, naked short antics that are being challenged by countries around the world standing for delivery, it's a race for commodities. It's not just precious metals. It's happening across the board on all the world's commodities, but it's a race to secure them. and the idiocy of the West to continue the facade of suppressing the prices to support whatever illusion they're trying to do, the strength of the US dollar, of the bond market, of whatever it is, will end very badly. And maybe someone in Trump's organization told him this, and that's why you're seeing so much of this coming home under the guise of tariffs. It isn't because of tariffs when you see this kind of offtake. There's something much bigger going on. So anyways, I would say that I would expect prices just based upon the sophistication of the people standing for delivery and the sheer amounts of it. They don't do this unless they think prices are going higher. At the same time, they're all running for the exits in equities. I have the public headlong in equities, in margin debt, and in options. I mean, you can see it's the contrarian indicator of a generation right now. I think that things are going to get interesting into the fall.
At the very least, we've just proved how delicate the market is. As you just mentioned the other day, that $100 spread, how quickly it can go. It reminds me it's better to be a few decades early than perhaps 1 minute too late when all of this goes. Bix, as we're at the end of the show, I'm going to ask both of you gentlemen the same question here. Bix, you've been so amazing over the last decades. You were part of my awakening and all of this too with all your research. We're not getting any of this news on mainstream news. We're not getting any of this insights. Nobody's connecting the dots like you two gentlemen are doing for the audience here tonight. What can we tell the audience members here? What can they find on Road to Ruta? People who want to educate themselves here at this higher level to really understand what's happening in the background so that they can make the educated decisions here to protect themselves, their hard-earned wealth, and their families moving into this transition. What do you have for them here at roadtoruta.com, Bix?
Well, I try to point out the common sense things. When you understand manipulation, there's so many things that kind of change context about what's important for your financial survival, your survival in general, and how to hold your assets. Not what to hold necessarily, but how to hold it. Make sure it's in your own possession. Make sure there's no third-party risk. I would like to tell all you new and silver investors that retail is not booming right now like the wholesale side is. So now's the time you want to buy. The banks are not set up for a slam. And if they did, the moving averages are like $34, $35. It would be a small slam before the big metal buyers come in and jack the price up again. And we're coming into September, October, November. This is the hot time for silver. So get your physical silver in your own possession as soon as you can. And if you have cryptos, Bitcoin especially, that's up at $120,000, now's the time to go half and half. I've said this before with cryptos, and every time I say it, it proves over time cryptos are very volatile. And I love them, and I understand them not as much as silver, but I'm getting to understand it. You're going to want both in this new world we're headed into. Come hell or high water, if you just got Bitcoin, you're not going to do that well. You need to get some silver, and all your friends will be buying silver because they'll see the price moving like cryptos have moved in the past.
Right.
I do see $600 silver and as kind of the first stop after 50.
Guys, for all of that and much, much, much more, including some of the research in the Grand Canyons, the Calutrons, all of these secret projects, go check it out at roadtoruta.com. Andy, before we go, also, we have a couple of specials on the beyondmystic.net/silver page that you gave me last time. A lot of people are still, I know they're out of date. So let's talk about that here tonight and also talk about junk silver. People still asking me, hey, does Andy still have some junk silver? Is this $1 over spot still valid here? What do you have for the audience members who want to get into the physical here through you tonight here with your discounts for the Beyond Mystic?
I should have checked that, but I would do that for you, for your listeners. On the junk silver, I know we have it priced higher than that, but I would do that for your listeners. I think last week we had silver maple leafs. They were like $289 over spot, and junk silver wasn't even on it, but I would do it for your listeners. I know I was able to buy $11 million worth of it for under melt value. That's how crazy it is. I've never seen premiums like they are ever like this ever in my career. So the guy that I bought it from, the wholesaler, he doesn't hedge, which is crazy to me. Price went up. He said, you take all 11 million, I'll sell it to you below melt value. So I did. And we've been selling it at spot, actually. for a while. We were doing it at spot, and I know it's gone up past that. But for your listeners, I know we had it higher last week than 99. I would do it at 99 and maybe even better. So let's just say this, that I'll make sure. I can't speak out of turn. I don't know how much we have left. I'd like to do it at spot for you guys. I really would. I might be able to.
Well, guys,
it'll be 99 cents or less.
Just fill out the form, guys. BeyondMystic.net/silver. Tell them what you want, and Andy and his team here will give you the best possible price.
Hey, also, I would venture to say that at least if you're a U.S. citizen, the pre-65 coinage is the best buy you could possibly get out of any form of silver for so many reasons. So I'm just going to throw that.
Yeah, it's just not sexy, right? It's not the silver coin, but it's dimes and quarters. But it is the best value during the pandemic. I would have paid anyone in the country between $9 and $11 over spot to buy as much back from them as they would sell me for 3 years.
I saw $13 over spot during the pandemic for junk silver.
For 3 years, and because of its utility.
Yeah.
The fact that it's like a pendulum, it goes too far to one side, it's gone way too far to the other side. And this is happening where the premiums are non-existent when the exchanges are seeing this kind of delivery volume. And the LBMA is 8 weeks delayed on delivery because evidently the Bank of England is short on trucks and manpower. That's what they've tried to tell us. So I would say that it's as good of a buy as anything. I apologize I don't have that handy. This is kind of an impromptu get together. So I just promise that I'm going to tell my staff that if your people call, the worst it'll be is 99 cents. I'm going to try and get it even down closer to spot, but I can't know until tomorrow morning until I talk to my head trader.
Guys, check it out, beyondmystic.net/silver. Fill out the form, tell the guys what you need there, and they'll get the best price for you. In the meantime, also educate yourself. That's the biggest gift you can give yourself in this crazy world. For that, you can go to roadtoruta.com. There's some free stuff here on the side. There's also a private road as well. And if you want to try before you buy with BIX, so to speak, you can find his YouTube channel here at Road to Ruta. And you can find also Andy's amazing new Miles Franklin Media YouTube channel here with Michael McCory, who's just joined the team here recently. Lots of great interviews there. You want to watch those. That's Miles Franklin Media here on YouTube. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us here tonight for this force majeure endgame with the tree. I don't know what Silver Warriors on the page. I love that. Of all three there, I think BIX looks the most authentic on this.
My wife said, "Why can't you look like that?" So I got to start working out now.
You got a lot of work to do there, Bix, to get pipes like that.
You guys look amazing. Thank you so much for watching.
What's with your hair, though, JC? I just don't understand what your hair is doing there.
It was like the Conan. So Cliff gave me this picture, and it was not our faces. It was like whatever other warriors, and I had to put our faces kind of like to frame the shot. Anyway, so the guy in the middle had long hair on this bandana.
It's like the villain from Flash Gordon. Remember that guy had hair like that?
I think it's supposed to be a riff on Conan the Barbarian. That's what Cliff was going for, and I thought, okay, I like it. We'll play with that. And as soon as I put the heads on it, I'm like, fuck it kind of works. I like it. So, guys, let me know what you think about the poster in the live chat. Thank you so much for watching tonight. Leave us a comment below. Let us know how we did. Watch the Wu 5 forecast. Janine I just put that out a couple of days ago. So if you want to know all the forecasts here for the month of August and gold, silver, and the rest of financial stuff, you want to watch that episode, you can find that on beyondmystic.net here. It's the top of the page here. We just recorded a couple of days ago, so go check it out. Thank you so much for watching this evening, guys. I love you guys. Thank you, Andy. Thank you, BIX, for all of your time. Love you. See you soon, guys, and take care. Au revoir.
Au revoir.